Margaret had come home, but not for a reunion. I returned on a March afternoon when the snow had just melted and the road leading to the Aspen Hearth Hotel was still coated with winter's grime. The rental car I drove nearly got lost 3 times among the pine trees, thanks to a rotting wooden sign, barely legible now, "Welcome to Aspen Hearth," since 1963. A place that had once been my family's pride was now just a faded shell in the heart of Colorado. If someone had told me a year ago that I would give up everything, my career, my penthouse in Boston, even the retirement fund I'd carefully built, just to return to the town I once tried so hard to leave behind, I would have laughed. But now, I stood in the echoing lobby of our family's hotel, breathing in the damp, moldy air, and realizing I had no other choice. My name is Margaret Bennett. I'm 46 years old, and I used to be the operations director for a high-end resort chain on the East Coast. 20 years of experience, 5-time management award winner, and a resume any corporation would chase after. And yet, here I was, facing a painful truth. My family's hotel was on the brink of bankruptcy, and if I didn't act, the bank would seize it in less than 3 months. My father, Walter Bennett, 75, was the one who called late one night. His voice was hoarse, trembling, full of regret. "Margie, if you could, just maybe, come home and give me a hand. The hotel, I can't manage anymore." I heard my mother, Eleanor, somewhere in the background shouting, "Tell her not to sell any more shares to those brokers." I didn't say anything. I just hung up, stared out the window of the apartment I once thought I'd grow old in, and began packing. Aspen Hearth was where I grew up, summers running barefoot on the back lawn, winters by the fireplace listening to Dad tell stories about guests from all over. It was a small hotel, just 24 rooms, but located near a famous ski resort and built in a rare Swiss-style chalet architecture that had stood the test of time. Throughout my teen years, I helped my mom at the front desk, wiped breakfast tables, and cleaned rooms with the housekeeping staff. I used to think, one day, I'll get out of here. And I did. I went to college, then started working, climbing every rung of the hospitality industry. I once managed a 5-star resort with 180 rooms, a golf course, a spa, and a team trained to perfection. There, no one called me Walter Bennett's daughter. I was Ms. Bennett, the boss. Yet here I was again, stepping into Aspen Hearth's front office and shivering, not from the cold, but from the shock. The old computer screen blinked. The reservation system was still done by hand in a worn leather ledger. The tile floors were faded, the sofa had frayed edges, and the chandelier looked ready to fall. No stable Wi-Fi, no online booking site, and a 2.4-star rating on travel platforms, filled with reviews about poor service, outdated rooms, and staff with attitudes as cold as the mountain air. My father was tired, too old to climb the stairs. My mother still clung to her old ways, handwritten logs refusing to modernize and believing guests returned out of sentimental loyalty. I felt a storm inside, part anger, part pity. Angry because they never once asked for my input when things began to fall apart, but pity too, because I knew they had tried, just in the wrong way. Dad said the bank's going to foreclose in June if we can't pay the remaining $120,000. 0 cents. Mom muttered maybe we could sell a few rooms, or negotiate with a lawyer. I cut in. "No, Mom, negotiation and prayer aren't strategies. This hotel needs saving, with a real plan." That night I stayed in the office, opened my laptop, and began a full assessment. Operational systems, local competition, current marketing strategy, virtually none, and customer feedback from the past 3 years. One word kept coming up: outdated. I knew I wouldn't sleep until I found a way to stop this legacy from crumbling. But I also knew, to save this hotel, I'd have to dismantle everything my parents thought was right. And I was ready to do just that. I began the mission to revive the Aspen Hearth Hotel almost immediately, barely taking a single day off since I returned to Colorado. Every morning, I was the first to walk into the lobby, and every night, the last to leave. But not everyone noticed that, especially not my parents. At first I thought showing them results would be enough to change everything, I used to believe that results were undeniable. But I forgot. People only see what they want to see. I personally rebuilt the reservation system, registered accounts on platforms like Booking, Expedia, and TripAdvisor, and taught myself how to run Google Ads to drive traffic. I redesigned the logo, hired a photographer to take professional shots of the hotel, angles that made an aging place look like a cozy winter retreat. I used $20,000, 0 cents of my savings, to replace all lighting with energy-efficient fixtures, upgraded all bedding with high-quality bamboo fiber linens, and brought in a professional cleaner to refresh every single room. The little details, essential oils at the front desk, freshly ground artisan coffee every morning, were all handled by me. I also restructured the staff. Didn't fire anyone but retrained everyone according to 4-star service standards. Amanda, a 22-year-old receptionist who once didn't know how to smile at guests, is now our most highly praised employee in online reviews. I taught her how to make eye contact, say thank you with warmth, and handle tough situations without losing professionalism. My parents saw all of this, but their reaction was an eerie silence. One morning, I overheard my mom on the phone with an old acquaintance. I happened to catch her saying, "Yeah, Margaret's working hard, sure, but she's a bit too mechanical, not like her father, who did everything with heart." I froze behind the door. Mechanical? I had given up a comfortable career, a retirement fund I spent 10 years building, to come back here and break my back every day? And my mother saw me as mechanical? That evening, while cleaning up the new bar I'd added to the lobby, my idea to generate extra income from walk-in guests, I was carrying a box of glassware into storage when my dad walked by and muttered, "Margie, maybe you should let Ryan help out a bit. You're doing too much, you might burn out." Ryan, my 39-year-old brother, who hadn't shown up even once in the 3 months I was renovating the hotel, only dropped by on weekends to pick up Mom's homemade pies. The guy who had started 3 businesses and bankrupted all of them, and who now claimed he was researching the startup market. I just smiled, not because it amused me, but because I had no words left. One day, I was invited to a local business meeting where hotel owners shared marketing strategies. I didn't tell my parents. I quietly attended, bringing along a freshly printed brochure for Aspen Hearth. When it was my turn to present, the whole room listened closely. Several asked about the Snow and Hot Chocolate Festival campaign I had organized, which brought in nearly 80 guests in just one weekend. When I returned home, my father asked, "You went out again? Your mom said you missed dinner." I laid the documents on the table and replied softly, "I had a meeting with the Hospitality Association. Aspen Hearth might partner with a ski tour next month. I'll send the details by email." He nodded. No compliment, no look of satisfaction. That's when I started to realize I could save the hotel, but I couldn't force them to acknowledge me. To my parents, the hotel was a symbol of family honor, but when I, the daughter who refused to follow outdated traditions, who dared to innovate and modernize, stepped up to take responsibility, they only saw me as a temporary helper. Maybe it's because I'm a woman. Maybe because I was the only one brave enough to break the mold. I remember one afternoon when I printed a financial analysis. After 3 months of operations, profit had increased by 22%. Room occupancy reached 78%, the highest in 5 years. I handed the report to my father. He skimmed it, set it down and said, all right, but don't get cocky, watch out for fake reservations." I understood then. He would probably never say, "Good job, daughter." But I kept going anyway, not to earn their praise, but to prove to myself that I could, even if no one else would admit it. I knew I had reached my limit on a Thursday morning when I walked into the laundry room and found Carmen, our longest-serving housekeeper, in tears. She had just been reprimanded by Ryan, my younger brother, for refusing to rearrange her shifts according to a new schedule he had arbitrarily imposed. Under that schedule, Carmen would be working 3 consecutive shifts over the weekend just because everyone needs to be flexible during peak times. I walked in and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. I'll take care of it, I said. I wasn't angry anymore, I was just tired. Tired to my bones. Ryan had returned to Aspen Hearth 2 weeks ago, bringing with him a handful of untested ideas and a cocky attitude like the hotel was his personal playground. My parents were thrilled, as if they'd been waiting forever for the real heir to come home. Me, the one who had spent half a year reviving everything, had suddenly become the manager. That night, sitting alone in the office, the soft glow of the computer screen lighting my face, I stared at the operating cost report and felt nothing. The rising profits, the increased bookings, they no longer brought me joy, because I knew that no matter how much I did, they would never truly give me any real authority. And then, like fate opening a door, it appeared. I was driving back from the building supply store when I spotted a weathered wooden sign leaning by the road. For sale, Willow Creek Inn, call. I'd heard of Willow Creek, an old inn deep in the woods, about a 15-minute drive from Aspen Hearth. It had once been a popular retreat in the 1980s, but had closed down after a few rough winters. People said it was too run down. No one in their right mind would buy it. But as I turned onto the dirt path leading to the property, something inside me shifted. Willow Creek still held its classic charm. Weathered gray wooden walls from years of rain, moss-covered sloped roof, foggy glass windows. But the scenery was breathtaking. A stream wove through a pine grove, and beyond that snow-capped mountains loomed. The air was crisp, still, and most of all, it felt untouched by anyone else's expectations. I sat in my car for nearly half an hour. No calls, no paperwork, no financial calculations. Just a feeling. And that feeling told me something very clearly. I had saved a legacy that wasn't mine. Now it was time to build one that was. 3 days later, I met the property owners, an elderly couple who had retired years ago. They recognized me immediately. "You're the woman running Aspen Hearth who's been trending on TripAdvisor," they said, smiling. When I told them I wanted to buy and rebuild the inn, the wife held my hand. "We always dreamed someone like you would come along. Do it, Margaret. This place deserves a second life." I used what was left of my savings, the part I had reserved for retirement, and took out a bank loan using the financial documents I had originally prepared for Aspen Hearth. Everything moved quickly. I officially became the new owner of Willow Creek Inn, just 2 weeks after seeing that for sale sign. I renamed it the Evergreen, a symbol of endurance, something that stays green and alive no matter the season. No one in my family knew, at least not at first. I still went to Aspen Hearth each day, fulfilling my duties like nothing had changed. But when I started taking off every afternoon for meetings with clients, my parents simply nodded. Ryan, however, smirked. "What kind of networking keeps you busy every single day?" I smiled. "You know, people with real plans tend to have full calendars." I hired local contractors, a former architect I'd worked with at a resort last year, and a young interior designer I'd met at a hospitality conference. Every afternoon, I drove out to Evergreen, scraping off old paint, laying out floor plans, discussing ideas with builders as if I were rebuilding myself from the ground up. I wasn't doing this for revenge, not anymore. I was doing it because, for the first time in my life, I wanted to create something that wouldn't be compared or judged by people who never understood me. I wanted a place where I was heard. A team I chose and led. A hotel that didn't just carry my touch. It was me. Just 6 months after I first stepped onto the neglected grounds of Willow Creek, the Evergreen officially opened its doors to guests. There were no bright banners, no loud grand opening party. I simply stood at the entrance, wearing a plain dress, greeting each of our first guests with a gentle smile. But in my heart, it was the most solemn ceremony of my life. The Evergreen had 18 rooms, each with its own unique style, from minimalist Scandinavian design to cozy North American-style cabins. I spent hours picking out every wall painting, every shade of blanket, every scent of essential oil in the bathrooms. In the main lobby, I had a large window installed, flooding the space with light and offering a view of the valley below, where a stream curled like a silver ribbon. The first guest who walked in exclaimed, "I never imagined a place this small could make me feel at home, but it's a home more beautiful than any dream." I felt alive again. The most surprising thing was this: people started showing up through the very channels I once struggled to get, working for Aspenhearth. Travel review sites quickly filled with comments. "The evergreen is a hidden gem in the pines. Personalized service down to every detail, worth every penny. The owner used to run a luxury resort chain, and you can feel it the moment you walk into the lobby." Not long after, a travel magazine featured the evergreen as the ideal boutique getaway of the winter season. They called me the woman who turned abandonment into motivation and built her own paradise. That line made me laugh because it was true. I started receiving emails from small hotels in the region, asking for advice on operations. Even a few big investors requested meetings, but I turned most of them down. I didn't build the evergreen to turn it into a mass mecca brand. I built it to find myself again. And I had no intention of losing that ever again. What made me happiest was that half of the evergreen's staff were former employees from Aspenhearth. They had left because they couldn't stand Ryan's disorganized leadership. Carmen, the woman who once cried in the laundry room, was now head of housekeeping. Every morning she walked into my office with a smile. I've never worked somewhere that made me want to come in every day like this. And then the inevitable happened: comparisons. The family hotel, Aspenhearth, began to decline rapidly. Negative reviews piled up. Rooms are dirty. Staff are untrained and awkward. It's not what it used to be. My mother called one day, her voice tense. "You know, people are talking about your hotel. They're calling it the perfect version of Aspenhearth." I didn't respond, because the truth was, I hadn't built a copy of anything. I had only built what I once wished I could create, if someone had listened to me sooner. One winter evening, I stood on the balcony of the evergreen, looking down at the twinkling lights below. The place that had once meant everything to me, now just a faded silhouette. I didn't feel sad. I only felt grateful, because that very abandonment had forced me to remember my own worth. I didn't need applause. I didn't need awards. I didn't need validation from people who were never willing to offer it. I had the evergreen. I had my team. And most of all, I had the belief that I deserved to be right here, where the light shined directly on my heart, no longer shadowed by anyone else. I was reviewing the expansion plans for the spa area behind the evergreen when my phone buzzed. The screen showed Mom, my mother, who hadn't called me in nearly 2 months since our last cold conversation over a family dinner. I hesitated for a few seconds, then picked up. "Margaret, could you come home tonight? Just a simple dinner. Your father and I want to talk." Her voice was soft and tired, no longer the commanding tone she usually carried. I didn't agree immediately, nor did I refuse. I just said, "I'll try." That evening, I drove back to Aspenhearth, not expecting an apology, but because I wanted to look directly into the eyes of the people who once turned their backs on me. And I wanted to hear what excuse they would use this time. The family kitchen was just the same: the red striped tablecloth, the old china set, the faint smell of something baking. My mother busied herself setting the table while my father sat silently, absent-mindedly, running his fingers along the rim of his coffee mug, as if a heavy weight hung over him. No one mentioned evergreen, no one asked how I'd been. After a few sentences about the weather and neighbors, my father sighed and tapped the edge of the table gently. "Margie, we know you're very busy, but Aspenhearth is in trouble. The bank has sent a warning. If we don't repay the maturing loan within 45 days, they'll foreclose." I wasn't surprised. I'd seen it coming for months as the negative reviews kept piling up, but hearing him say it out loud still hit me hard. My mother jumped in, trying to sound calm. "We were thinking, maybe if you could come back for a while, support Ryan, guide him the way you used to." I set my glass down on the table, cold, firm. "I already did that. For 6 months, no one checked in on me, no one acknowledged my efforts, and when I left, the only one given the leadership role was Ryan. My mother blinked. He's still young. But you're his sister, you understand, right? Family has to support each other. I looked her straight in the eye, my voice no longer angry, just the clarity I had sharpened over so many months. Family doesn't mean one person always cleaning up the consequences of another's mistakes. I'm not coming back to patch the holes Ryan dug himself. I've chosen my path, and I'm not stepping backward. My father looked at me for a long time, then lowered his gaze. Something in him seemed to crumble, like he was finally seeing that his daughter was no longer living in his shadow. So, you're not going to help? He asked quietly. I took a deep breath, then said, I'll give you a list of vendors, an optimized operations model, and a few marketing suggestions. If you need a consultant, I can recommend someone even better than me, but I'm not coming back to Aspen Hearth. Not out of anger, but because I've chosen to believe in something better, to believe in myself. I left that house with a weight lifted from my chest. No triumph, no bitterness. Just the final release from the old expectations I had spent 40 years trying to fulfill. 3 weeks later, I heard that Aspen Hearth had officially hired an outside consultant for recovery. Ryan avoided me every time we crossed paths in town. I didn't need an apology, and he clearly wasn't ready to give one. The evergreen continued to grow steadily. We had just hosted a small seminar for young entrepreneurs in the tourism industry. I stood on stage, speaking about why you should build something that's yours, instead of trying to fix something others never valued. After the session, a young woman came up to me, took my hand, and said, Your story gave me the courage to walk away from a place where I'd been overlooked for 5 years. I gently squeezed her hand and smiled. I hadn't just built a hotel. I had rebuilt myself. And now I was helping others build their own paths too. I used to think that if I were good enough, worked hard enough, people would recognize it. But then I realized, sometimes, people don't acknowledge you not because you're not good enough, but because they don't want to believe you're better than what they're used to. Ever since the day I refused to return to Aspen Hearth, a wave of whispers began to spread throughout town. Not praise for the evergreen, but stories laced with prejudice about me. The ungrateful daughter, the selfish sister who didn't care about family, the traitor who chased glory at the expense of her own blood. At first, those words hurt. I'm not made of stone. I too once wanted to be understood. But then I realized, I don't need to be understood by those who only ever saw me through a narrow mold. One morning, I sat at a small cafe downtown, sipping my usual latte. An old acquaintance approached, eyes cautious. I heard your hotel across the street is doing pretty well. I smiled. Thanks, we're doing our best to maintain quality. They took a sip of their tea, then quietly, as if confessing something. Maybe I was wrong to think you did all this to compete with your family. I simply replied. I didn't do it to compete, I did it because I knew I deserved a fair chance, and when no one gave me that, I built it myself. The evergreen kept growing. Guests came from California, New York, even Europe, seeking a memorable retreat away from the city. We hosted early morning yoga sessions, outdoor dinners beneath strings of golden lights, and acoustic music nights under the pines. Every time I passed the front desk and saw guests excitedly checking in, I was reminded of those first days at Aspen Hearth, when I was seen as someone's assistant. Now, I was no longer anyone's shadow. I was fully myself, whole and independent. Of course, not every day was perfect. There were still unfriendly looks when I appeared at town events. Still meetings with local associations where I was, accidentally, left off the invite list. And my family? They hadn't really changed. Ryan avoided mentioning me at gatherings. My mother always had that weary, regretful look whenever we crossed paths, as if I were the capable child who just wouldn't bow her head. But I don't bow anymore. I no longer need to shrink myself to fit into their version of me. Last month I was invited to speak at a regional tourism conference. Standing on that stage, looking down at rows of attendees, some of whom had once belittled me, I didn't feel nervous. I spoke about failure, about being overlooked, about working yourself to the bone and receiving no thanks. Then I said, real success doesn't come from people clapping for you. It comes from standing up, patting your own back and saying, I didn't give up. The room erupted in applause, this time because they understood, not because they pitied me. I stopped chasing acceptance. Instead, I chose to live, true to who I am. The evergreen is living proof of that. And I, Margaret Bennett, never needed anyone's approval to know exactly who I am. One September morning, I stepped out onto the second-floor balcony of the evergreen, holding a cup of hot herbal tea, breathing in the crisp, gentle chill of the Colorado autumn. The pine forest in the distance was shifting into shades of amber, with a few golden leaves drifting down onto the roof, like time's quiet greeting. I no longer count the nights I stayed up late worrying, no longer check online reviews obsessively, no longer search for my parents' approval. Or anyone else's. I no longer wait for someone to see me. Because now, I truly see myself. The small office next to the lobby is covered in drawings from guests, children's scribbles, photos with staff, thank you letters from visitors near and far. Every time I walk in, it feels like being wrapped in the beautiful memories I helped create. The life I've built isn't perfect, but it's genuine. Mornings spent preparing breakfast with my staff, laughter from the kitchen, the scent of cinnamon waffles in the air, evenings spent telling stories by the fire with guests, where I'm no longer the owner, but just Margaret, a travel companion on their journey. A few weeks ago, my father sent me a handwritten letter. The writing was shaky, just a few short lines. I was wrong not to believe in you sooner. If your grandfather were still alive, he'd be so proud. I keep the letter in a drawer. I haven't written back, but every time I read it, I no longer feel angry. I just feel released. Now, standing in the middle of something I created with my own hands, I no longer ask anyone, am I good enough? I don't measure success by recognition, but by the peace I feel each morning when I open my eyes to a new day. And I know, I've walked the right path, even if no one paved it for me from the start. I am Margaret Bennett. I was once dismissed, once silent, in search of love. But today I choose to stand tall, to smile, because I didn't abandon myself. And that's what I'm most proud of in this life. Margaret Bennett's story is a powerful reminder that we don't need recognition to have worth. When pushed aside and underestimated, she didn't fight back with words. She proved her value through action, building success from the very place others had written her off. In real life, sometimes you have to stop waiting for permission from others and start believing in yourself. Because true peace doesn't come from validation, it comes from living in alignment with the person you choose to become. What do you think about Margaret's journey? Have you ever experienced something like hers? Feel free to share your thoughts below. And don't forget to follow the channel so you won't miss more heartfelt stories and life lessons about family.